Poland, Lithuania and Latvia say they're considering asking NATO for help with the crisis on their borders with Belarus. Thousands of migrants have arrived in Belarus in recent weeks, hoping to reach the European Union. The EU accuses Minsk of creating the crisis deliberately, and EU foreign ministers are to adopt new sanctions against the country. Meanwhile, migrants stuck on the Belarusian side of the border with Poland are suffering from a lack of food, water and shelter as winter sets in.
Coming home in a coffin. This is not the way the families of two Kurdish migrants had imagined their return. One of them had decided to turn back after spending weeks in freezing conditions, stuck at the Polish border. But he suffered a stroke before he could make it back home. He was there for 19 days, and every day he would call me to say he didn't like the situation. Every day people were dying and drowning. There were a lot of corpses. That's why he decided to come back, and we were happy when he said he wouldn't travel anymore. A humanitarian catastrophe is growing on the border between Poland and Belarus, where migrants hoping to enter the EU have been stuck for weeks. People have started to die as temperatures drop below zero. Still, neither side wants to let them in. Out of desperation, the migrants have built makeshift shelters and lit fires to try and keep warm. Volunteers have come in to provide food, warm clothing and basic medical assistance where they can, but it's not nearly enough, and many are scared for their survival.
Please find a solution. Try to contact the ICRC or the UNICEF or the UNHCR or WFP or anybody can let us be alive. We don't have a food, we don't have a water. We thought it's 2 days, it's 22 days. We brought 2 bottles of waters, you can finish them in 1 day, and the other days you cannot do anything.
Their presence has inflamed a bitter standoff between Belarus and Poland, with tensions on both sides escalating. Belarus is threatening to allow migrants through, and the West is threatening further sanctions against the Belarusian regime. Unwanted on both sides and unable to leave, the migrants have no choice but to wait it out and pray that help arrives soon.
Well, DW correspondent Barbara Vazel is on her way to Poland's border with Belarus. Welcome, Barbara. Winter is coming and people are dying in Polish forests. What reason does Poland give for not fulfilling its international obligations and processing these people, regardless of how they arrived?
No reason whatsoever, because they don't comment on the humanitarian situation on the border, Phil. They more or less are denying it. They passed last week in Parliament an ordinance that makes pushbacks legal according to Polish law. So that's what they try to do. People they catch in the border regions who have managed to cross the border, if they come upon border guards, they will be pushed back onto Belarus territory. So this game back and forth goes on with horrible consequences. In the forest last night, 2 Syrian men were found by an NGO close to death under hypothermia. Really, they needed to be taken to hospital very urgently. So the death toll will be rising because it's getting colder by the day. But what Warsaw does is point with their finger at Belarus, saying this is hybrid warfare against Poland. They're threatening our national security. The borders stay closed. These people don't want asylum in Poland. They just want to cross the country and go to the rest of Europe. And we are not taking them in. So the standoff will continue politically. There's no movement whatsoever from the Polish side.
OK, and now there are reports that the Polish Prime Minister is calling on NATO to take concrete steps to help solve this crisis. Is this a fight NATO wants to be part of, and what might that help look like?
How could this possibly be a case for NATO? I mean, NATO has assured Poland of their solidarity, but that's just general words. This is not a conflict that can be solved militarily. I mean, what are they thinking of? And NATO, of course, doesn't want this because they could not possibly interfere in that sense. What, for instance, happened is that Britain sent a couple of soldiers for logistical support to the border here. What they're supposed to really do here, nobody knows. But that sort of thing is going on. And of course, if there are incursions by like Russian or Belarus fighter planes into airspace of Lithuania or Poland or so, NATO will push back against that. But the real humanitarian crisis, the standoff between people here at the border and the border guards, that cannot be solved by the military. Everybody knows that.
Right. Meanwhile, the EU is looking at increasing sanctions against Belarus from today, which is how this all started. So how will new sanctions affect things? Will this make it worse or better?
It will make it worse because, of course, Belarus has already tried to get the migrants who are massed on the border to move against the border. They have disseminated disinformation. I mean, this is, among other things, a huge war of disinformation. They have put on all social media and onto the phones of the migrants there messages saying, pushed against the border, and once you've made it across, buses will be waiting for you and you will be taken to Germany. So there is that narrative again that we know from the 2015 crisis. And then the Polish side, of course, they send out messages to every foreign phone. I just got it too on my phone. Every foreign phone in the region saying, I do not believe what the Belarus side is saying. They're lying to you. You can't cross. It's illegal. And don't take anything from the Belarus border guards. So it is really going back and forth. And it seems at the moment nothing is moving. But the Belarus side is really actively trying to get migrants to move against the border, to sort of get clashes and to more or less sort of get something active happening, which would really make for a dangerous situation because there are about 12,000 Polish soldiers and border guards around here, and they all have weapons. So an incident could happen very easily under these circumstances.
OK, Barbara Weisel on her way to Poland. Thank you so much. Meanwhile, EU foreign ministers are meeting in Brussels and they're due to increase sanctions against Belarus for its role in this crisis. Brussels Bureau Chief is Alexandra von Namen. Welcome, Alexandra. New sanctions likely to target Belarus's state airline, which has been bringing migrants into the country. Tell us more about what's being considered.
Belavia, that's the name of the state airline in Belarus, has already been banned from the European airspace. And now the foreign ministers, you can see one of them talking behind me, they are gathering here to decide how they are going to stop Belavia from being able to lease aircraft, because almost all of its 30 aircraft has been leased from European companies. So if Belavia is on a sort of blacklist, European companies won't be able to lease their aircraft to Belavia anymore. What's also on the table is the proposal to, maybe not directly today, but in near future, to sanction the airport in Minsk, for example, or to put other airlines that are transporting migrants to Minsk on a blacklist as well.
Right. Well, the EU argues that Alexander Lukashenko is acting against Brussels in retaliation for sanctions that are already in place. So what do they hope to achieve with more of the same?
Well, you're right. We have to say, even though sanctions against Belarus seem to be biting already, Lukashenko doesn't seem to be impressed at all by them. And that is, of course, something that the foreign ministers know. However, the German foreign minister, Heiko Maas, told us here today, just a short while ago, that he still believes that it is important to put up even more pressure on the regime to change its behavior, because he doesn't believe that what he said, that Lukashenko could change what he is doing without further sanctions. And Heiko Maas even indicated that the European Union is even ready to go further and to impose more economic sanctions against the regime in Belarus.
Thank you for that, Alexandra von Namen in Brussels.